Some situations you just don't want to be involved in. Work drama, relationship drama, anything that starts with, hey, can I ask you for a favor? Because that's never actually a favor. That's the beginning of a problem.
You gotta help me. You help everybody else in the garage. You gotta help me.
Yeah, I know I help everybody else because they're nice people and deserving of help.
Oh, they're nice people deserving of help. If I wasn't about to die, I'd be sick. Riga, Mrs. McKenzie wants my goodies.
All right, so this episode leans into one of the oldest sitcom setups there is, getting caught in the middle of someone else's chaos. And it works really well here because of who it happens to. Louie is probably the last person that you'd trust to navigate a delicate situation, which makes him the perfect person to be stuck in one. And what this episode does really well is just let this situation spiral. Because once Louie's involved, it's not about solving the problem anymore. It's about how much worse things can get before it blows up. With that in mind, welcome back to The Rank. I'm John, and today we're going to be ranking the 9th episode of the 3rd season of Taxi, titled Thy Boss's Wife. Written by Ken Eston and directed by Jimmy Burrows. Let's see how this one stacks up, starting with the episode overview. So we open the episode with Louie on the phone, and we're only hearing Louie's side of the conversation. But it's pretty easy to infer what's going on. He's talking to his boss, Mr. McKenzie, and Mr. McKenzie clearly doesn't want Louie to tell Mrs. McKenzie that he's there if she shows up. The best part, though, is when Louie starts sucking up to Mr. McKenzie, telling him how he's got a great telephone voice. We eventually get Louie saying, "Oh, I'm sorry. I was under the impression that you liked it kissed." So we're setting up the A story right in the beginning. There's a row between the McKenzies and Louie is caught in the middle. But right after that, we're gonna get the B story, I guess. Bobby is practicing miming because he's taking a miming class in his acting course. He's showing it off to Elaine, and when Tony shows up seeing Bobby doing Walking Man, Tony's gonna poke a little fun. He's gonna do a little pose. He's gonna say, "This is guy standing in garage." But then Bobby hits back with, "Nuh-uh, that's dumb guy standing in garage." But Louie's gonna cut them both off with, "I love this, a duel of wits between unarmed opponents." So then Bobby's gonna do the most iconic pantomime. You know, the stuck in a glass box pantomime. Of course, this is when Jim shows up, and he's gonna start looking at this glass box, which was already fun, but then adds to it by asking, when did they put that in here? And even after Elaine explains to him that it's fake, he still turns to Louie and asks if Bobby can hear us in there. Soon after this, though, the plot's gonna get moving because Mrs. McKenzie's gonna show up at the garage, and she does not look happy. Louie's trying to head her off, but when she threatens to roll up his tongue and stick a toothpick in it, he backs off. But once she's upstairs in Mr. McKenzie's office, Louie seems absolutely thrilled. It was a bizarre turn of events. But apparently these types of fights between the McKenzies happen every once in a while, and Mrs. McKenzie exacts her revenge for these fights by picking a young good-looking cabbie, inviting him over for dinner, sleeping with him, and then apparently the husband makes that cabbie disappear. He vanishes, according to Louie. And so what Louie's excited about is that he thinks that she's going to choose between Tony and Bobby, and he's rooting for Bobby. And not that Louie is a nice guy or anything, but this feels particularly sadistic on his part. But Bobby doesn't believe him, and he reassures Tony. He's like, "Come on, it's Louie, he's full of shit." But thankfully for both of them, Alex comes into the garage and he's, "Oh, I'm so tired, I worked so much, blah, blah, whatever." But now they're going to be able to ascertain the veracity of Louie's statements. But before Alex can answer them, we hear Mrs. McKenzie coming out of the office, yelling at her husband, calling him a wart or something. And Alex hides in his locker. The feeling is it must be true. She comes down into the garage area and starts looking around. Nobody is willing to make eye contact with her, except Jim, of course. And he just looks terrible. Louie, still feeling giddy, asks her if she wants him to introduce her to any of the young cabbies. Instead, she invites him over. And now Louie's terrified. Why me, Mrs. McKenzie? Because if my messing around with someone halfway decent bothers my husband, this'll kill him. So we're gonna cut to the next scene, and this next scene is just really bizarre. We're in Alex's bedroom, and he's asleep, but he's awakened by a phone ring. Of course, the only assumption you can make is that Louie's calling, right? Nope, it's some lady named Joyce looking for Sheila. And no matter how many times Alex says it's the wrong number, the call just keeps going. It goes until he pretends that there is a Sheila there and she just can't come to the phone right now. And then he gets back in bed and goes to sleep. What? Don't worry, there's more to come. Louie is gonna burst into the bedroom and turn on the lights. What's he doing in Rieger's bedroom or apartment for that matter? Well, he broke in because he's drunk and he wants him to help him with the whole Mrs. Mackenzie deal. Alex doesn't want to help. He only helps everyone else because they are nice people that are deserving of help. But Louie insists. So Alex comes up with an idea. Call and tell her you're sick and you can't make it. And Louie is ecstatic. Yes, you've got it. It's perfect. He picks up the phone. He's going to call her. Oh, but wait. Alex is like, she saw you earlier and you were in the picture of health. She's never going to buy it. Damn. But next, Alex is going to come up with another idea. He says to basically preemptively call Mr. Mackenzie and tell him what's going on. Louie's pumped. Yes, perfect. Louie starts to dial the number. Oh, wait. Damn it. He's still going to end up being pissed at you for telling stories about his wife. All right, so that one's not going to work either. So we're on to idea number 3 now. The third's the charm, right? Well, Alex reasons that the only reason that she picked him was because Louie is loathsome and despicable. So it stands to reason they just need to find someone who's more loathsome and despicable. And Louie initially reacts in the same ways he did the other two. Yes, oh, that's perfect. And then he stops and he just like makes this face and just kind of I don't know, it's really funny. But that's it. Alex's ideas are exhausted, as is he. Louie's a dead man and Alex wants to go back to sleep. So next we're going to see Mrs. Mackenzie sort of getting ready in her home. She's wearing a slip of sorts, so she's, trying to look sexy, right? And when she goes to answer the door, Louie is there. And he's like, there's no way that anything's going to happen between us. But, he's looking at her outfit, so he just stops and says, I want you. They start making out. But he stops it again and he's going to give an impassioned speech about his loyalty to Mr. Mackenzie. Mrs. Mackenzie's then going to say, Mr. Mackenzie can't stand the sight of you. So Louie says, oh yeah, then I'll have his woman. And they start making out again. He stops it again though. He's like, you only pick me because you think I'm the bottom of the barrel. She's like, no, I find you attractive, Louie. And she says it in a way that nobody in the audience believes that she actually feels that way, but somehow Louie still does. And it keeps going like this, with Louie trying to say no, but continually getting sucked in. And eventually she's going to go to the bedroom without him. And he's like, I'm not going in there. But then he steps in front of the bedroom and he's looking at her in the bedroom, narrating how sexy she looks. Then they cut to her perspective and she's laying in a bed and she just says, okay, Louie, if that's how you feel. Then he immediately comes flying into the room. And when I say flying, I mean he dives through the air onto the bed, which was a huge freaking bed, by the way. But it was such a funny way of doing it that it clearly made the actress playing Mrs. Mackenzie break as well. And Louie is actually going to start taking his clothes off as he's saying, no, we can't do this. This is wrong. She's a married woman, etc. Naturally, there's still one more hiccup to go. Mr. Mackenzie unexpectedly arrives home. Louie's got to hide, but where? He's looking all around and eventually decides he's going to hide under the covers on the bed. And Mr. Mackenzie's going to eventually reveal that the reason he's actually home is that he just didn't feel comfortable leaving on a trip after they just had a big fight. And they start making up. All the while, Louie is stuck at the foot of the bed under the covers while they're making up. And that ends the A story. But we've got to wrap up the B thing that's happening. So we see Bobby still practicing his pantomime in the garage. This time he's doing the tug of war miming thing. And Jim's going to come over to help, but then stops and says, this is that miming stuff, right? And Bobby's like, yeah, good job. And Jim's like, I'm slow, but once I get it, it sticks. Then he turns to leave and runs into the glass box from earlier. And he turns to Bobby and asks him, when the hell is he going to get this thing out of here? So Bobby assures him he's got some people coming to pick it up in the morning. Good, because it's beginning to become an eyesore. Jim's just great. But that's the whole episode. Let's see how it ranked.
A rank.
So the rank is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a score of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Then I have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive into the rankings, I just want to say, if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, first category is story. Honestly, I thought this was a great story. The boss and his wife get into a big fight every once in a while, and every time they do, she picks a cabbie to exact her revenge on her husband with. It's dumb, but it's the perfect contained sitcom story. Just dumb enough to be fun, while not so dumb that it doesn't make any sense. I gave it a 5. So that brings us to acting, and the acting was great. I didn't see any flaws in the acting with this one. I was really invested. I gave it a 5. So that brings us to dialogue. And as you may be able to tell, I really enjoyed this episode. I thought it was funny and engaging. Ironically, I really thought it made me laugh way more than it actually did. I thought I was laughing through the whole thing. But the laugh counter is going to disprove that. Still though, this is dialogue, not the laugh counter. I gave it a 4.75. So that brings us to episode coherence. The only knock on coherence is the weird scene with Alex in his bedroom. I just don't really understand why we had that. It was such a non sequitur, but other than that, there really wasn't a problem. It was basically just a filler scene and a reason to get Alex more screen time. Anyway, I gave it a 4.85. So that brings us to character relatability. I think Alex's limited role in this is probably the least relatable because it's such an absurd circumstance that they put him in. He's just so undisturbed that he just goes back to sleep after somebody broke into his apartment. Also, I mean, how do you really relate to Jim? Other than that though, I thought it was great. I gave it a 4. So some really good rankings for this one. It's not going to take a huge laugh counter to keep it in the top 3 tiers. The question is, will it have enough of a laugh counter to get into the top tier? And unfortunately, it got me 13 times, which is decent, but not enough to push it there. It ended up with a grand total of 36.6, which keeps it in the second tier, the holy grail. But as for the series average, it goes up to a 27.56, which still keeps it in mediocre, but this season has been killer. So I'm wondering if we can get it into the top 3 tiers here as a series average after this season, the way it's going. But if you're ranking along with me, put your score in the comment. I'd be really curious to see where you're at. So thanks for listening and or watching. Check out my other taxi ranking episodes or any of my other sitcom or movie ranking episodes on this channel. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. For up-to-date rankings, you can check out my website, which is up and running now finally. It has all the rankings. It's therankpodcast.com, where you can also email me at info or john@therankpodcast.com. And if you really want to support the show, you can become a patron at patreon.com/therankpodcast. That's also newly revamped. But I will leave you with this. Why didn't Tony take the bullet for the team on this? He couldn't figure out who's the boss's wife. Because who's the boss? I did a who's the boss reference. Okay. Check out the full episode at
He is malfunctioning.